So you're booting up console Valorant for the first time and maybe are a bit overwhelmed by all the settings. There are so many settings, and what are all of these presets? Are there any secret settings you need to know about to swap that aren't enabled by default? Spoilers, there are, and we're going to cover it all for you today in our complete console settings guide. Getting you set up from beginner to advanced, you'll have everything that you need to start fragging, so buckle in and let's get started. Starting out with the general settings that everyone should take a look at. Right away, the very first thing I tell any student when I'm coaching them is that you need to change your map settings so that you can view the entire map all of the time. On screen, you will see the map settings that we suggest. The main thing is that you need to make sure that your map doesn't center around you. When it centers around you, this forces the map to get cut off at a max range, resulting in you missing out on potential info across the map. You don't want to see an arrow that says that there is an enemy on the other side of the map. You want to know who that exact agent spotted is. It's also worth noting that you really want to have vision cones on. This will just let you know what your teammates are looking at and if they're blocked off by a smoke. Second up on must-have settings is unchecking walk while in focus in advanced settings. One of the most important things in gunfights in Valorant is to stay mobile, and walk while in focus will just slow you down during fights, making your strafe smaller and easier to track. There are a couple of other general settings that you could take a look at. For example, something many players like to change is their enemy highlight color. Your options are 2 shades of yellow and then red and purple. We've done quite a bit of research into this, and something that's kind of interesting is that the color red is actually chosen for stoplights because it's really easy to see from far away. Our eyes just respond really quickly to the color red. This suggests that red might be the color worth using if you have trouble spotting enemies, whereas yellow is also pretty easy to pick out from a range and is used for stoplights for the same reason. For this reason, if you struggle to fight enemies at range, maybe yellow is the color you want to go with. Purple outlines aren't bad either though, since they often stand out against many of the colors in the background. It's mostly preference on which one you find easier to spot, so pick your favorite. There's also right or left-handed mode that you can play with. Many people attribute this to eye dominance, though we will admit that we're not sure if this really has too much of an effect when playing on a computer screen. Nevertheless, if you want to find your dominant eye, what you can do is look towards a doorknob in your room and stick your arm out. Then place your thumb over the top of the doorknob. Now close your right eye first and then close your left eye. Whichever eye still has your thumb covering the doorknob is your dominant eye, meaning that you should be using that hand for in-game. So if your dominant eye is your right eye, you should be using right-handed mode. Again, there's no evidence of this mattering in Valorant, but it's a fun way to figure out your eye dominance, and you could choose to believe it if you so choose. Now let's get into the juicy stuff and talk about aim settings and sensitivity curves. For starters, you're going to want to enable advanced sensitivity option. This will let you adjust your focus mode as well as your standard aim. For standard aiming, you want to make sure that your sensitivity is high enough to clear angles efficiently. If your standard sense is too low, you're going to have a really tough time pushing into sights, since oftentimes you're going to have to clear multiple angles in a very short amount of time. Say for example, you flash a 50-50 angle. You want to be able to quickly peek out and clear both sides before that flash fades. If you can't do that, you may want to reconsider your sensitivity. Along with this, we'll also take a look at your focus mode sense. This one can be a bit more precise. With focus mode, our goal is to be comfortably accurate while trying to micro adjust to your target's head. On screen, you'll see the settings that we recommend, but if you're more comfortable with console shooters, you can consider bumping your standard sensitivity up a bit higher. We really wouldn't recommend going much above 12, but it really is up to you. Now scrolling down, we're going to take a look at some of the dead zones and curves. On console, you get the option of selecting a bunch of different options for your sensitivity curve, which will cause the rate at which your crosshair speeds up to change. For example, a linear curve means that your crosshair will not move any faster regardless of how fast you push the analog stick. However, with a light curve, it will make it so if you push the analog stick all of the way, it will move slightly faster than normal. As you would guess, a heavy or aggressive curve will cause your crosshair to move very quickly. This is different than sensitivity because it's more about how fast your speed ramps up the further that you push the analog stick. The reason curves like this need to exist is because of the limitations of a controller. On PC, if you want to turn faster, then you move your mouse faster. But on console, that sort of liberty obviously doesn't exist. This sort of curve or acceleration is the compromise to still allow you to turn quickly while not affecting your small corrections that you might need to make while aiming. On screen, you'll see a bunch of graphs showcasing the curves and what they look like for each setting. Personally, we recommend using a light curve as a beginner since it is the most natural. If you've played Call of Duty, light is similar to linear in COD. Delayed is similar to dynamic in COD, and standard is similar to standard. As for Overwatch, Extreme is similar to the Overwatch curve. And if you're new to console shooters and have no idea what is best for you, then that is okay. A simple test that you can do to figure out what is best for you is just choose one of the curves and then go outside of the practice range to the flying bots. These bots won't trigger aim assist, so you can practice your curve and see what feels the most comfortable for you. Try to find a curve where when you flick to the bots, it goes straight to them without you having to adjust much. Finally, for your aim dead zones, you just need to make sure that your inner aim dead zone isn't too low, otherwise you might experience some stick drift. And for your outer aim dead zone, set it to 1. If it's set lower than 1, then that will make you reach your peak of the curve faster, which almost defeats the purpose of the curve. I suppose you could min-max this if you're experienced, but if you're watching this video, chances are that it's better to leave that 1 be. Now, this is how you find all of the best settings for yourself, but what you really need to recognize is that a lot of aim in Valorant comes down to your fundamentals. While I was learning console, I actually did a climb from unranked to diamond, and what I found is that most of my kills actually came from just things I knew from PC. My aim itself wasn't amazing when I first started, but I was able to pick up the game very quickly because I understood the fundamentals of the game. Luckily for you guys, I have created an hour-long masterclass over at SkillCapped that goes over all of the fundamentals of Valorant, teaching you everything that you need to know to master the game. We cover crosshair placement, how to peek corners, and even how to play off of your teammates effectively so that you can start fragging out more in your matches. What's even better is that our entire site is backed by a rank improvement guarantee, meaning that if you don't climb 500 RR while using our service, then you don't pay. We do this because our service works, and if it doesn't work, then you shouldn't have to pay. So if you're picking up console Valorant and you're really looking to climb right now, then we highly recommend checking out skillcapped.com using the link below for a discount. And other than that, let's talk a bit about the button mappings. You may notice that there are a lot of different button presets to select from. All of these are fine, but they pose some issues that we've looked into solving. For starters, let's choose either the Valorant or traditional settings and go from there. Let's start by swapping our L1 button to crouch. This will automatically swap the keybind with your L3 button, so now you'll be using ability 2 with L3. We highly recommend that you use the bumpers for things like crouch and focus mode so that it frees up your thumbs for aiming entirely. You don't want to have to be clicking your joysticks while moving or aiming during a gunfight, otherwise it can easily cause unwanted actions. Having crouch on L1 easily allows you to crouch and uncrouch during gunfights without having to worry about that. Next up, we've got our abilities. Now, if you have paddles installed in your controller, we highly recommend to assign at least some of your abilities to them to free up space in your controller. There's actually not enough keybinds on your controller to include all of the abilities that we need on Valorant, so you're definitely going to need them. If you have paddles, we recommend binding walk to your other left bumper and then using some of the extra buttons for focus mode and some of your abilities. The reason that you want to bind walk is because using your analog sticks to have to walk or run is a bit funky. It's very common to accidentally make 1 or 2 footsteps without using a walk bind, which can easily result in you losing a round in unwanted scenarios. If you do have room to bind walk, then you're going to want to adjust your run dead zone as low as it can possibly be. This just makes sure that you are always running until you press that keybind. Next, let's take a look at your fire key. We highly recommend rebinding this to R1. The reason for this is because when you set your trigger dead zone to 0.1, it's still quite difficult to only fire 1 bullet when using the triggers. The bumpers are a bit more responsive, allowing you to be far more intentional with your shots, so it's definitely worth it. Finally, while it's not a button mapping, depending on if you're using paddles or not, we highly recommend that you change your focus mode setting to toggle. This makes it so you don't need to worry about holding focus mode during your gunfights, freeing you up to focus on your movement. Since you can't very easily use both bumpers at once to focus mode and crouch during gunfights, this can be pretty necessary. This does take some getting used to, but given the binds that we have to work with, this seems to be the best way to go. Now, speaking of focus mode, let's talk about that. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's really up to you to try it out either way and figure out how you prefer to aim. Just know that focus mode does have increased aim assist, but players have hit Radiant playing both ways. The advantages of not using focus mode is that it frees up an extra button for you and you don't have to constantly worry about swapping in and out of focus mode when taking fights. It allows you to quickly break utility and then flick back to your target without skipping a beat, which can be really nice versus things like gecko flashes or Reyna blinds. However, it also means that you need to be making corrections at a higher sensitivity, since your standard sense must be high enough to clear angles effectively. This might be tough for some people, and that's where focus mode can make it a bit easier on you. Focus mode allows you to have the best of both worlds. You can be fast when you need to, but slow it down for those micro corrections. The only problem is that sometimes it could slow you down since you need to press an additional button while aiming, complicating the aiming process further. It also takes up a precious keybind, which without paddles can be actually pretty important. It is worth mentioning that there is a setting to change focus mode to instead prioritize ADS, which might actually appeal to a lot of people if they played a lot of ADS shooters. While Valorant is not an ADS shooter, we have tested this and found that it's actually pretty good on console. Do note that ADS slows your movement speed and fire rate, so it's not really ideal for encounters where you're spraying, but it can be good to use when you're fighting long range with one taps. We could definitely see a world where a player likes to use standard mode for aiming up close and then prefers to prioritize ADS for longer range fights instead of focus mode. Moving on to crosshair settings, I'm not going to dwell on them too much. We do also have a crosshair settings guide coming out just this week. They really are personal preference, and as long as the crosshair doesn't look like this, it doesn't really matter to us what you choose. Otherwise, we just recommend copying this crosshair code. If you're looking for a super beginner crosshair, then you can use this one to help you stand still when you shoot. If you're moving, the outer lines will jump out, letting you know that you're not accurate. This will give you a better idea of when you can and when you cannot shoot straight. Lastly, you want to direct yourself to audio settings and find yourself HRTF. We recommend turning this on. It will feel a little bit weird at first, but it also felt weird for PC players when they added it initially too. It's supposed to provide better directional sound, and after a few games, you won't notice a thing. And that's it. You should be all set to go and roll into console Valorant. But before we wrap this up though, let me tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and we think that is a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like your local gym membership promising that you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered you that, but not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. With over 500 guides split into over 50 courses, nobody else can compare. We also offer direct access to each and every user in our Discord, so you can get connected to some of the best players in the game that will give you personalized feedback just for you. So if you're really looking to master Valorant today, then check out SkillCapped using the link in the description below for a discount. And other than that, we will see you in the next one.